The fastest fish is the sailfish. It can swim as fast as a car travels on the highway, so around 80 miles. Seahorses, even though they can coordinate their eyes like no other horse can, are poor swimmers and can die of exhaustion in stormy waters. Seahorses are the only fish that swim upright, so they should quit doing that. And also the slowest fish, on the opposite of the sailfish, is the seahorse. It swims so slowly that a person can barely tell it's moving. The slowest seahorse is the dwarf seahorse, which takes about 1 hour to travel 5 feet. Some fish don't have scales. Sharks, for example, have rough, sandpapery skin instead of scales. Fish have multiple Cretan and pre-Cretan overtones. For example, the Greek word for fish is ichthys, which is an acronym for Jesus Christ, God's Son, Savior, and what used to mark early Christian tombs and meeting places. Because of their association with fertility, fish have also been linked to Isis and Aphrodite. In Japan, the fugu or pufferfish is a succulent but lethal delicacy. It contains tetrodotoxin, a deadly poison. However, it's so delicious that Japanese gourmets risk their lives to prepare it. To make this high-risk dish, chefs must have a certificate from a special school that teaches preparation of this toxic fish. Still, it's impossible to completely remove the fish's toxin. The chef just removes most of it, with the traces of poison actually giving fugu its unique taste. Even so, it can get dangerous, so much so that Japanese law actually forbids the emperor himself from ever eating fugu under any circumstances. Some desert puffish can live in hot springs that reach temperatures greater than 115 Fahrenheit. A male emperor anglefish lives together with up to 5 female mates. If the emperor anglefish dies, one of the females turns into a male fish and becomes the leader of the group. Isn't that convenient? The Mudskipper is a fish that spends most of its time out of the water and can walk on its fins. It carries a portable water supply in its gill chambers when it leaves the water. Public life and reputation can be just as important to a fish as they are to us. Fish recognize and remember their individuals and build complex social networks. They know when they're being watched by others and often alter their behavior accordingly. Bystanders can learn about the social status of an individual just by watching interactions between the fish. They nurture friendships with affection and have a host of amazing ways to communicate. While we're used to hearing serenades of birds, some fish call to each other with sounds of chirping and foghorns. The memory span of goldfish has long been underestimated, but it's finally been revealed that their long-term memory can last for many months at least. Perhaps the most impressive example of a fish's memory is how, after several years, a salmon can follow her nose home. Amazingly, she remembers the specific smell of the stream in which she was born. Salmon will often battle strong currents, predators, and even leap up waterfalls on this exhausting journey upstream. Fish can also learn to use tools, which makes them scary, build nests, and in some cases outperform primates with their learning abilities. Some fish have figured out impressive ways of obtaining food, like squirting jets of water from their mouth to capture insects above the surface and using rocks to open shells. They create burrows and chambers under the seabed for shelter, lining these structures with coral for added strength. Some fish build nests to hide their eggs from predators, others bury themselves under sand and coral from protection to sleep, or will even steal someone else's bed if they like the look of it. Fish typically have quite small brains relative to the body size compared with other vertebrates, typically 1/15, 0.06%, the brain mass of a similarly sized bird or mammal. Fish can also get sunburn, but that's unusual unless there's something about their environment that does not allow them to seek deeper water or some kind of shelter. The Antarctic Ice Fish is the fish that can live in the coldest temperatures. They have antifreeze in their blood and live permanently at -1 degree Celsius. Parrotfish can produce a mucus tent that completely covers them to protect themselves. Fish have a specialized sense organ called their lateral line, which works like radar and helps them navigate in dark or murky water. It was not until 1863 in London when aeration and filtration of water was understood. From that point, people were able to keep fish as pets. Before that, fish usually died pretty fast. Fish are very speedy swimmers. Some of the fastest ones are sailfish, marlin and tuna. A sailfish can swim up to 68 miles per hour, a marlin can swim up to 50 miles per hour, and a tuna can swim up to 47 miles per hour. Most fish are cold-blooded, unlike us humans who are warm-blooded. In the fish world also there is an exception. Tuna and mackerel sharks have warm blood like people. An ova fish also have warm blood. And salmon living in saltwater environments migrate a vast distance to return to freshwater to spawn. Salmon can travel up to 50 kilometers per day on their spawning journeys, which is equivalent to us training more than a marathon every day. In total, their migration can reach upwards to 3,000 kilometers from the ocean upstream through freshwater where they will spawn. Salmon and sea trout live in both saltwater and freshwater. These fish hatch in freshwater and then swim to the sea where they mature into adults. They undergo significant body changes and have specialized organs to adapt to and excel in both freshwater and saltwater. Scientists can figure out how old a fish is by counting growth rings on its scales or its ear bones, called otoliths. The rings mark seasonal changes in fish growth, like the annual rings in tree trunks. Otoliths grow like pearls, but the added material changes color depending on the season. The summer ring is whiter and the winter ring is thinner and more translucent. In scales, a series of fine rings appear as the scales grow. In summer the rings are wider apart, in winter the rings are closer together, because the fish grow more slowly, of course. Each pair of rings indicate a year. More than 240 species of fish contain so little salt that doctors recommend them in salt-free diets. For most species, truly fresh fish is almost odorless. Fish begin to smell fishy when it starts to deteriorate, usually when it isn't stored or preserved correctly. Have you ever asked yourself, will the fish I catch survive if I release it? The answer varies greatly on a number of factors. If the fish caught with artificial lures are handled carefully, most will survive. If the fish was already stressed before being caught, for instance, because of spawning or higher water temperatures, it has fewer chances of surviving. If the fish is played for a long time and is exhausted before release, if the fish is hooked through a sensitive area such as the gills or the eye, or deeply in the throat, which is more likely if you're using bait, if the fish is handled roughly, for example squeezed strongly or held out of water too long. Still, if you want to unhook and release a fish, and if it seems to be having difficulty after unhooking, cradle it gently in the water until it regains its equilibrium and swims off under its own power. A clownfish is born male and has the ability to change into a female. This can happen when the dominant female dies. The dominant male will turn into a female and then choose to mate with another male in the group. However, once they change, they can't change back. Unfortunately, due to the increased popularity of Finding Nemo, the number of captive clownfish kept in tanks has increased despite the film's message about the damage caused by capturing clownfish. Clownfish have a symbiotic relationship with sea anemone, which is a sessile predator animal. Clownfish bodies have a mucus layer which is immune to the toxin the anemone produces to capture prey. The anemone provides shelter from predators, and the clownfish in return removes parasites and drives away intruders. Fishes like surf perches and some sharks don't lay eggs, instead carry and give birth to live young. Scientists have discovered that the embryos of some of these fishes actually consume each other in the womb. The global fishing industry catches an average of 154 million tons of fish every year. That said, a large portion of the fishing industry includes animals that aren't technically fish, such as crab, shrimp, and other marine animals. Much like fishing itself, fishes in art go back even before the dawn of human civilization. Many examples of cave art around the world show fishes of various species, which is seen as evidence that fishing predates civilization. Even after the dawn of civilization, fish appeared in human art and buildings. These range from sculptures, wall carvings, and paintings, and other examples of art throughout the ages. The god of water, Enki, usually used a fish as his symbol. The people also commonly offered fishes to the gods at their temples. Healers and exorcists also dressed up as fish while performing their duties. A legendary hero of Babylon, Oannes, is actually supposed to have dressed in the skin of a fish. An ancient Syrian goddess also used a fish as her symbol. This was a Targetis, a fertility goddess. During her annual festival, only her priests had permission to eat fish. Also, the biblical tale of Jonah originally involved a fish. Only the newer translations describe it as a whale. In older texts, it's only said that a big fish swallowed him up. After 3 days, the fish vomited him up so he could continue on his divine mission to Nineveh in the Assyrian Empire. And that's all for today. I'd like to thank everybody who watched this video up to this point. I'm Alex, and until next time, beware the falling apples.